welcome to the fourth weekly rush through the week's rushes. A rushed rush through the weekly rushes. Something like that. Anyway, it's the fourth episode. It's been a weird week, really, for film news. A really weird week. It's sort of been... There hasn't been an awful lot beyond the awful tragedy of the, accidental, unintentional shooting of the cinematographer of Rust. And really that's kind of rolled on this week with various sort of members of the crew falling into the sort of spotlight, being the focus of investigations and what have you. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But that's kind of been the primary story this week that's been occupying most column spaces in terms of movies and things like that. One of the big stories at the beginning of this week was did any of you see the story revolving around the Dune poster? The poster for Dune that was released in China, where the black actress in it, Sharon Duncan Brewster, who is a British actress of Trinidadian heritage, she plays, I think, the ecological scientist or something in it. She was removed from posters in China. Now, it wasn't immediately clear whether the poster was designed by Warner Brothers or whether there's an eastern wing to Legendary, who are the producers of the film. And at first, it's not too clear as to whether it was Legendary East that did this. Listen to this. Chinese state media have claimed that the removal of Duncan Brewster, the actress, was an attempted smear by its enemies. So they've immediately fanned it away as if it's somehow a sort of framed job to make them look racist. Now, there is some sort of precedent here, because John Boyega, with the Star Wars Force Awakens, he likewise appeared in a poster that was released in China where he was holding the same lightsaber, but you'll see in the photo, but he was made much smaller and less significant. And there was also another instance with Doctor Strange, I believe, where I think a Tibetan monk character was essentially whitewashed and diminished and pushed to the side. And this kind of tendency to ingratiate and charm and sort of entice the Chinese market, it's a tricky balancing act because, of course, there's the suggestion and the feeling that there's a lot more racism towards black people coming from China at the moment, and that's going to start to tug against Hollywood and these mainstream big tentpole films if in the promotion they're going to start adjusting the diversity of their posters. I think it's a really dangerous thing, this. Sticking with Dune, Denis Villeneuve, the director, and Timothée Chalamet have announced that Dune 2 is happening. It might seem weird that there would have been any doubt about this, but although the box office is strong, it's not necessarily going to be a guarantee that it covers its costs. There's a huge press push. Sometimes you need to take the figure of the budget and then double it and then add a little bit more, and that's the kind of money they need to make. Now, obviously, with views on HBO Max and at the theatres, it's going to get close enough. But the fact that they've agreed, Legendary, again, we've just been talking about them, have agreed to make Dune 2. This is a wonderful moment for Denis Villeneuve, because clearly I'm hoping and I'm thinking that we're going to hear Zendaya say at least more than 3 lines in the sequel. Dune 2 is expected to hit cinemas on the 20th of October 2023, which means, because Denis Villeneuve has got a little bit greedy, that he also wants Dune 3. And I wonder whether, Warner Brothers and Legendary might commit a little bit like Lord of the Rings to the 1-2 punch of the last two. What do you think, guys? Do you think it merits a sequel and then a trequel? Have you seen Dune? Check out our review elsewhere. We were really impressed by it, though I can see how it wouldn't necessarily be everyone's cup of tea. And so we get to Rust, which is, as I say, really pretty much the biggest news story of the week, and the sad death of Helena Hutchins, who was shot with a loaded gun by Alec Baldwin, the star of the film, also the producer of the film. The Rust investigation continues apace. There are 2 characters that are principally being honed in on and focused on by the investigations, but also there's a lot of speculation online and on social media and what have you, and a lot of reporting that's very much putting these 2 key members of the crew into the spotlight. But a third one has just started to come forward too, or be suggested. So the first AD on this film is David Halls, and the armourer Hannah Gutierrez. Don't know if I pronounced that correctly. They've both come in for criticism on the Rust set. They've got lawyers. They're all lawyered up. I mean, there's an idea that Hannah the armourer was perhaps a little bit too inexperienced. There was also a suggestion that she wasn't in control and across the bullets or what was actually on set. She disputes this with her lawyers. There was the suggestion, also I saw this week, where Nick Cage apparently screamed on set that she shot a gun too near to him or something like that. There was some sort of irresponsible act that Nick Cage felt she engaged in. But a third name has now been mentioned, and this is Alan Graff, the stunt coordinator who's been accused of engaging in unsafe practices, according to one of the other performers or actors on the film. And I do remember in the first few days of all of the reporting, there was the suggestion that Alec Baldwin's stunt double had been involved in shooting live rounds for target practice and stuff like that. The microscope and the magnifying glass is sort of swirling over these various characters, and it's becoming an intriguing and quite complex investigation into the chain of command, in a sense, on a film, and how it's never quite as clear as it being one person. It's neither the person who pulled the trigger, it's neither the person who handed the gun, it's neither necessarily the person who felt they'd made the gun safe and made the bullets and the ammunition safe. It could have been any other number of other people that perhaps intercepted the gun and the bullets beforehand, what have you. So it's a complex developing story, and I'm sure we're going to hear more. But there's another element to the Rust story that I think is quite depressing. Did anyone see Donald Trump Jr. getting involved, tweeting away? Now, obviously, the Trumps have some beef with Alec Baldwin because Alec Baldwin did such a brilliant impersonation, such a satirical send-up of the president. And of course, the Trumps don't like Baldwin. But they don't like Baldwin to the extent that Donald Trump Jr. has had t-shirts made, saying this with this strapline: "Guns don't kill people, Alec Baldwin kills people." Deeply, deeply, deeply flawed statement. Deeply insensitive when it comes to Alec Baldwin, who is probably going through all sorts of emotional horrors in his coming to terms with what's actually happened. But also disrespectful, entirely disrespectful to Helena Hutchins' family and the memory of her. He also said on Instagram, Trump Jr., "For those who are out there doing the fake sanctimony about leaving Alec Baldwin alone, let's all remember that Alec Baldwin would be the first person pissing on everyone's grave if the shoes were on the other foot. Screw him." What kind of a world do we live in where someone's death, accidental death, where no one on that film set intentionally wanted this to happen, and then other people can kind of post this stuff? So, you know, this is trolling from the Trumps essentially here. But t-shirts saying "Guns don't kill people, Alec Baldwin kills people" is quite staggering. Now, this is the weirdest casting news, or the weirdest concept for an idea I've ever heard or ever come across in my life. Ryan Gosling has been cast as Ken, Barbie's boyfriend, Ken the doll. Ryan Gosling. I like Ryan Gosling. I mean, I'm a fan of Ryan Gosling, but I don't know whether you need someone who's a bit camper and a bit funnier. Anyway, he's starring, or he's scheduled to potentially star, opposite, that's if the project actually becomes a reality. It's been talked about for years now. But apparently a gap has cleared in Ryan Gosling's schedule. Margot Robbie is slated to play Barbie. But get this, Greta Gerwig and her partner Noah Baumbach are both scheduled to write it. They're writing it, and Greta Gerwig's directing it. Now, Greta Gerwig has directed Little Women, Lady Bird. Noah has directed A Marriage Story. You know, they do sort of art house films. And so this is a strange concept. I can't even begin to imagine how it's going to work. I mean, unless they're going to completely ditch the idea that these characters are dolls, but they're just characters with these names supplanted into a real world. Or are they perhaps, maybe they're going to do something like this. Maybe they're going to start with those animated films that Maddie and Kiki used to like, and then they're going to transmogrify and transition into real life, a little bit like the Amy Adams film Enchanted. And then you'd get a chance for a sort of wry New Yorker, sort of tongue-in-cheek, sideways glance, all that kind of stuff, look at their lives. But it's a curious one, isn't it? I love the Ken doll from Toy Story, and Maddie found out the other day that he's voiced by Michael Keaton. He's very talented, Michael. Nice bit of casting here. Brendan Fraser, haven't seen him for a while. You'll have known him from George in the Jungle, or George of the Jungle, and The Mummy series of films. Well, he's been cast to play a villain in a Batgirl movie, and this is the first DC movie that's going straight to HBO Max. He's playing apparently a villainous character called Firefly, who's a sociopath with a passion for pyrotechnics, and he'll be starring opposite Leslie Grace, who is playing Batgirl. He also, though, intriguingly, has landed a part in Darren Aronofsky's new film called The Whale, but it's about a 600-pound middle-aged recluse. And he's also to appear in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, alongside Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. So things looking up for Brendan Fraser. I'm a fan of his. I think he's a good man. He's a good egg. First sign of Christmas. Elf. Who doesn't like Elf? Do you like Elf? I love Elf. Every year we watch Elf. Will Ferrell's blank expressive eyes, his silliness, his dancing, his running around in yellow tights through the streets of New York, James Caan frustrated that his son is such a fairy, essentially. Well, Will Ferrell explained in a recent interview why he turned down $29 million to star in an Elf sequel. The original film made $220 million at the box office. It was directed by Jon Favreau, who's gone on to direct things like The Lion King, and I think he directed the first Iron Man movie, and he's an actor himself. Will Ferrell says that the reason he turned down a sequel was that he would find it too hard to sell something and justify the money for something that had a plot that was entirely similar to the first one. So I think a script was delivered, but it was very similar to the first one. But rather amusingly, Will Ferrell does recall when they were filming it, running around New York City in yellow tights and thinking, boy, this could be the end of my career. But apparently, and I didn't know this, James Caan reportedly said there was friction on set between Will Ferrell and Jon Favreau, and that's one of the main reasons the sequel never really got off the ground, because Jon Favreau obviously being the director, I'm sure that if a sequel was going to be made, they'd want the same team back together, and I think Will Ferrell and Jon Favreau are a little bit like that. And of course, Will Ferrell is soon to appear in a new series with Paul Rudd, I believe, called The Shrink Next Door. Has anyone seen the House of Gucci trailer this week? Me and Nadia reacted to it, I think yesterday or the day before. We were a little bit frustrated with the wigs. We also need to stand corrected that, of course, Lady Gaga was nominated for an Oscar, as was Bradley Cooper in the acting category. What we were getting incensed about was how Bradley Cooper couldn't have been nominated for a Best Director's Oscar for both of their performances and directing of A Star Is Born. Anyway, the second trailer's landed for House of Gucci. We won't show it here. Go over up there to watch the trailer, but her fans, everyone everywhere, is already clamouring for her to win the Oscar. And I just want to ask you guys, what do you think? Do you think already, just from the trailer, this could be her year? This could be her chance? It has all the hallmarks of an Oscar contender, doesn't it, as a film? I mean, the cast is vast. Jared Leto is fully prostheticised, if there's such a word. Al Pacino, I think, looks really good, and I can already see Al Pacino being nominated for Best Supporting Actor. There's Jeremy Irons in there. There's Salma Hayek. You know, it's a cracking cast, and it was giving me Godfather vibes, and at the heart of it is Lady Gaga, though I have to say she has about 18 different wigs just in the trailer. I felt 3 or 4 different accents, and she really changes, doesn't she, in weight and shape and everything. So I think that, you know, it looks like she's giving it her all. Anyone here a fan of Martin McDonagh? Martin McDonagh, the director of In Bruges, 7 Psychopaths, 3 Billboards. He's a very funny director. He's a very skilled playwright as well, actually. But at the American film market, he's already sold an untitled script for a new project starring Christopher Walken, Sam Rockwell, and Oscar Isaac. Now, Sam Rockwell and Christopher Walken both appeared in 7 Psychopaths. If you haven't seen 7 Psychopaths, please go and see it. It's batshit crazy. It's about the film industry in a roundabout sort of way. It's also got Woody Harrelson in it. It's crackpot mad, and it's very, very funny. So I think this is going to be an absolute corker. I mean, again, you know, when I see untitled scripts sold with those actors attached, it's pretty much a guarantee that it's going to be worth watching. Marvel Cinematic Universe, is it beginning to creak at the edges? Is DC about to run past them and win the race? I don't know. Eternals, the new Marvel film, is now currently rated as the lowest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe according to Rotten Tomatoes. Now, it's still not a Rotten Tomato, the Eternals film, which is the film that stars Gemma Chan, Richard Madden, Angelina Jolie's in there. You know, it's a great cast. It's a killer cast. But it does have the lowest rating of any Marvel film of all time. It scored a fresh rating, which means it didn't fall beneath, I think, 60, is it? So it got 62%. The only other film that was narrowly ahead of it was 2013's Thor Dark World, which scored, I believe, 66%. There's a lot of excitement about this. Obviously, it's directed by Chloe Zhao, who won the Oscar for Nomadland. And Nomadland is a beautiful, beautiful film. And she's very good at sort of authentic. I think did she do Rider or The Rider before that? She's interested in drama placed within real scenarios or real situations developing in the real world, and she captures that landscape of life and the landscape of emotion beautifully. And I've always wondered whether this has been a bit of a strange fit, you know, going from that Nomadland to a superhero film. I mean, I hear it looks beautiful, Eternals, and we will be watching it and we will be reviewing it, but why has it got the lowest rating on Rotten Tomatoes, guys? What do you think? Any Eternals fans out there or MCU fans out there that could inform me as to why they think that is? Final story, we've popped this on the Instagram feed today. Josh O'Connor, Prince Charles from The Crown, Paul Mescal from Normal People, the smash hit series based on Sally Rooney's book for the BBC. They're to star together in a film called The History of Sound, which is essentially a World War I love story, but a gay love story. And it's adapted from a short story by Ben Shattuck. The short story pivots around two characters who during World War I set out to record the lives, voices and music of their American countrymen, and in the process they sort of kick things up for themselves and fall in love. It's almost a sort of Brokeback Mountain of World War I. I think Paul Mescal recently has starred in, and we'll see him in The Lost Daughter, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, starring alongside Olivia Colman. That looks sensational. And obviously Josh O'Connor is to be seen in Mothering Sunday, which is going to come out soon, alongside Olivia Colman also. So Olivia Colman is starring alongside both of them. And he's also to be seen in Emma, alongside Anya Taylor-Joy. Films of the week, what's released at the cinema this week? Well, there were two major-ish releases, really. There's Last Night in Soho, which is the new Edgar Wright film starring Anya Taylor-Joy, Matt Smith, Thomasina McKenzie. And it's a sort of horror type film set within Soho in the modern day and in the 60s. We've seen it today. We will be reviewing it on the channel. Edgar Wright directed things like Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. It's gonna be, from the trailers, it looks like a really sort of quite dark and twisted psycho horror of sorts. So that should be an intriguing watch if you fancy that. Of course, it's Halloween this weekend, so all of the films that are being released, or the ones that I'm talking about, have a sort of horror tinge to them. The other one is a horror film called Antlers. We also saw that earlier in the week, and it stars Jesse Plemons. And at the centre of the film is a young boy called Jeremy T. Thomas, who, to be honest with you, is an absolute find. There is the birth of a new talent in Jeremy T. Thomas. But again, the full review of Antlers will be landing either this weekend or at the beginning of next week. And those are the two films I'd recommend that are out there for you to perhaps, take an interest in and perhaps book a ticket to go and see. So there you go. That was your fourth rush through the weekly rushes.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.